Tell me what the hell are you scared of when in the end the only thing
Where's
that's
the
up in the
love?
end
Right here on
love's
this
never
podcast.
failed.
Welcome to Love
Sometimes
Drops,
it's up to
where your
us, never
hosts
the things
and
that
One Love
took place,
ambassadors,
never
Charles
receiving
and
our
Diane,
ways.
will
Together
share
now,
love,
two an empty
hope,
world
and
that takes the
inspirational
sweetness of
topics
this life.
taken from
All of
their
the
journey
lessons we
and
learned,
world
all of
events.
the challenges
We will
of
also
life.
include on location recordings and special pop up guests from cool places all around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Whether big or small, love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never fails.
Welcome to another episode of Love Drops Podcast. We are very excited to start back at the beginning. What do I mean? Back at the beginning of the podcast. So, our guest today was also our host during the 2020 lockdown. And this is where we started the Love Drop podcast from her home. So, we're so excited to circle back to the beginning and have with us a very, very dear friend joining us on this episode.
Yes, we're so excited to have Eleanor Hooks with us, where our podcast got started. It was all with her, the inspiration and everything thereof.
Yes, a very creative home, a very healing space, and just a place to comfortably start Love Drop Podcast. And our studio was actually in her guest closet. We would go in the closet and record at the beginning. So that's where those first episodes were recorded. So
Without further ado, we'd like to introduce our Love Drop audience to Eleanor Hooks. Welcome, Eleanor, to the Love Drops podcast.
My goodness, that's quite an introduction. So much has happened over the past three years almost. And I'm so excited with where Diane and Charles are at this point, because yes, they started a podcast in the closet, and now they are known throughout the world, actually. So that is just really, it just warms my heart that is happening for them. And not only for them, but for all of the people that they touch. And that has a lot to do with, my career, where I have attempted to touch people in a way that really makes a difference. Okay. Just a little bit about me. I am a trained coach. I'm an executive coach. I'm also a counselor by training. So there's a little mix of that. I also am an inspirational writer. So I've been doing this for over 35 years and have also been a university professor. So I have a long history that I really can't share with you in such a short amount of time. But I can tell you that many roads have led me to mental resilience as part of my executive coaching and life coaching work. And also, it is very prominent in my writing. So I'm really looking forward to having this time to really kind of share with you some of my thoughts about that.
Awesome, awesome. I think this is a good place to interject and say that Eleanor is joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, where Charles and I were sheltering in place in 2020. Yes. And the three of us, well, we need to close that triangle and make it a square. The four of us, because Eleanor has a beautiful little friend. We say family member. I hesitate to call Zoe Hooks a doggy because Zoe is just like such a part of the family. So we all sheltered in place in 2020 and talk about mental resilience. Boy, we handled it well. I mean, we were all able to elevate through the ebbs and flows with one of Eleanor's favorite sayings, peace and blessings during that time. What'd you say, Charles?
Well, I can say it's a lot of peace and blessings and meditation. Yes, we gravitated towards the positive, and that aided our resilience.
For sure, for sure. So with that said, Eleanor, speak with our listeners about what mental resilience is to you in your journey, especially over the past 3 years, because you have had some interesting times.
Yes, yes. One thing that we haven't mentioned is that also during that lockdown, I happened to have been diagnosed with throat cancer. And I spent a good bit of time, first of all, being grateful for my previous experience in a kind of mental resilience. I didn't call it that at that point, but in my practice, in my not only meditation, but also my education and my training was all about positive psychology. That was, kind of a ground. Also, the idea of looking for opportunities and challenges. In fact, I rarely even refer to something as a problem, because by calling it a problem, I also give the impression that it's something that can't be managed. So when I call it a challenge, it means that it's something that I'm aware of, and therefore there's something that I can do about it because I'm aware of it. So mental resilience is very much the idea of being able to spring back from a challenge. That's what resilience is. It's springing back, being able to not go down a rabbit hole, so to speak, when something happens to you, but to actually be able to pull back from that, and from a perspective that I call the sage perspective, a wise perspective, you're able to decide how to move forward, or what to do next, or sometimes to do nothing, to simply allow something to happen. And with mental resilience, every person has at least 5 different ways that they can approach a challenge. And we call them powers. We might even call them superpowers.
Nice.
The first is to be able to have empathy. And so whatever is happening to you, or whomever is causing difficulty for you in a relationship, let's say, if your boss is, difficult to deal with, if, it could be a spouse, it could be a partner, it could be a friend, you look at that situation with empathy. And the empathy is not only for the other person, but also for yourself.
Absolutely.
So there's self-compassion, as well as the sense that the other person has something going on as well. And in fact, we call this, in the whole idea of mental resilience, mental fitness, we call those things that are happening our saboteurs in our mind.
Nice.
Saboteurs actually interrupt what is our normal way of being. Our normal way, whatever normal is, but our normal way of being is joyful and happy.
Yes.
And whenever we step outside of that into any kind of negativity or any kind of sense of, like you want to give up, you want to just, kind of throw up your hands, we used to say.
Yeah.
when you get to that point, you have gotten off center. You have you've lost who you really are, because who you really are is love and peace and joy. That's what's going on at the center. Your mind, however, is full of those saboteurs. And they
Yes.
show up in a lot of different ways and interrupt what would be a normal experience of joy.
Right.
So empathy is very important. And understanding that, in fact, you do have saboteurs in your mind, because it is in your mind. You're creating all of this. I actually believe, a little bit mystical, but I believe that we actually create everything. We create everything in our mind.
It starts there, right? It starts
there, and then we act on it to make it, try to make it real.
Absolutely.
That's what we do. That's what actions are all about. But anyway, one is empathy.
I don't want you to go to two, because I want to jump into one. No, I want to jump into one. Because what I'd like to do here is interweave your experiences through that, because we had the pleasure and the blessing, I call it, to be there alongside of you and support, notice, and just allow for how that played out. And so with the empathy and what you were saying, I'm not sure if our listeners caught it, but you had been diagnosed with throat cancer. You are an executive coach. We're in a time where we're doing things virtual and on the phone. So that is your livelihood.
Yes.
So one of the big things is, how do I approach? How do I continue? And I remember even one of your questions being, will I be able to speak after this? What do I do? That is my voice. My voice is what would you say, that's my moneymaker, or my voice, that this is my profession. This is what I do. I speak.
And I sprang back from that. Because as you know, I coached throughout my treatment process.
Yes.
And part of it was being willing to adapt. For instance, it was important for me to drink water in order to keep my throat moist and clear, because one of the side effects is dry mouth from the radiation treatment that I had. So what was necessary was for me, first of all, to pace myself when I was talking to clients, because I've talked with clients the entire time. I wrote speeches for clients. I did other work for them. I even designed a training program. So there were many things that I did. And I would simply tell myself, I can do this.
Exactly.
I can do this. I can get through this. My clients had no idea that I had any difficulty with my swallowing or speaking or anything. Occasionally, if I had a hoarseness that you might even hear a little bit now, the clients might say, do you need to get a sip of water? And I'd say, yes, just give me a moment. And I'd take gulps and gulps of water and continue. But my point in all of this is that if you have your mind in the right place, and by right place, I mean, when you face a challenge, it's easy to think of yourself as a victim. That, this is happening to me. But you're always in relationship with someone else.
Yes.
And there's always something happening at the other end of that relationship.
Mhm.
So when you kind of broaden your perspective and say, it's not only about me, I am in relationship, I am doing something that's going to, particularly when you have the sense, as I do, that whatever I do is not for me only.
Mhm.
It is for a whole host of people. So, and what I mean is that when I speak with a client, the client lives in a world of relationships too.
Mhm.
So whatever I do to support that client, I'm also supporting all the people in that client's relationship
Exactly.
orbit, so it's
Exactly.
like, so it just, and I could, and then of course it goes on and on, it branches out further and further. So
Mhm.
we are in a network of relationships.
Yes.
So it's important for us to know that we can survive
Yes.
if we have the mindset that says we are interconnected, we are not alone,
Mhm.
we can find opportunities
Mhm.
and gifts in the midst of challenges.
Right. Right.
And if we have that mindset, we can do
Mhm.
almost anything.
Mhm.
I think it brings on adaptability. And so I
Yes.
know for me, just watching you adapt to your situation and
Mhm.
watching you, as you said, it wasn't entitled mental resilience at the time. What
Mhm.
I saw was that you maintained your hope, that you maintained your push. And even when you were moving at a snail's pace, you were still moving, and you
Yes.
were also receptive, because it was sometimes when it did just really become overwhelming, but
Mhm.
you allowed into your space where it's like, okay, Sister E, you're gonna have to get something down and just something,
Mhm.
and you allow for the people, the
Mhm.
village, to
Mhm.
come and to just embrace you and to love you. And with you being such a leader, that was very humbling, because you had to kind of let the table turn a little bit, and all the people other than your professional clients, but the people closest to you, you allowed the space for the village to just come and love on you and just come and hold you up in a sacred space, because we were still at a distance, because we were still in the lockdown, we were sheltered
Mhm.
in place.
Yes.
But
But even through that, you served yourself and that leadership capacity very noble. No one knew it. So many of us look up to you. So many of us gravitated towards your energies as
Mhm.
well. Your resilience was infested with all
you
of it.
didn't want nobody to feel sorry for you. So I think
Oh no,
Charles and I had to
I
do a spiritual NDA, because you're
yeah.
like, just,
Yeah.
it's like we could not even, just with family, almost, she is well, every,
Yes.
she's doing good, because you didn't want that energy. You didn't want that pity.
Mhm.
You didn't want that pity.
Well, to that point, just to kind of look at this idea, we think of pity almost at the other end of that is humor. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I even requested of friends and family members is send me humor, send me jokes. And there are people who would call me and tell me jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And even with pain in my throat, I mustered up a laugh, or a chuckle, because I just believe that life does not exist in one mode, in one kind of experience. It's a variety of experiences that we have, and we have access to so many wonderful things. But to your point about the village, my arranging a village, I wanted to have people by text, since of course we were in lockdown, to communicate. And there was a lot of my learning around not only giving, but receiving.
Yes.
And I think that's part of resilience too. You can't do it by yourself. You cannot. The go it alone approach does not work. And I've learned that big time. And I got to the point where I felt as if I had a balance. I was giving and I was receiving, because it's not all one or the other. And it really develops this mindset of being in this life with other people rather than in this life, period. You know? And then life just comes towards you. You know, all of the challenges are constantly coming up, and you're feeling as if I've got to work this out. That used to be my almost a mantra. You know, I'll just have to work it out. It's like, no, I don't have to work it out. I have a whole host of people who can come and be a part of my, you know, people talk about having their tribe, their squad, their, you know, their village, their, you know, however you want to define it. It's absolutely critical to have that. And not only when you're ill.
Exactly.
To just have that all the time.
Exactly.
But, you know, we talked about empathy and that's part of self-compassion. And then another part of mental resilience is being able to be curious. So if you are kind of locked into a particular way of thinking, if your mind is not open, then when you face a challenge, it's very difficult to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this? You know?
Yeah.
So when you remain curious, it means that you open yourself up for other people to share what they know or what they have experienced, or you know, what their perspective is. There's just a wealth of wisdom out there outside of our thinking and our experience. So exploring. And then another point is navigating.
Well, before you go navigating, just the curiosity, that was another thing that I witnessed with you, because, oh my goodness, were you curious? You were on top of it all. You would be in that room just typing away like a mad scientist, just typing away, just finding information and alternatives and just different things. And you say, oh, and I'm talking about Amazon boxes. We used to joke about it because, oh my goodness, we were between you and I know we kept Amazon in a little bit of business, because it was like sometimes 2 and 3 boxes a day. But that curiosity allowed us to see it, but then we let it go, because just as many boxes came in. If it didn't fit, we're like, nope. And we take it right back over to that UPS and just send it back. But there was just a constant flow. You were open to things. You were open to ideas that maybe in an earlier portion of your life, you might not have even thought about that. So your curiosity was contagious, because it also allowed us to be curious about, you know, just different things. And it brought to us a viewpoint and perspective that we hadn't had before. So that curiosity just really opened up. It opened up a broader space. And I think that it was a big help in our mental resilience. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think it helps to have a conversation with other people too. So your being there was also, and you know, kind of a how should I say, an inspiration to explore more, because then I could have a conversation, and again, a back and forth in terms of what this means. But another kind of funny thing about this curiosity is that whenever I have any kind of medical procedure, I will go to YouTube and watch the video.
Oh, yes, you would.
And this
Yes.
Oh, yes, you would.
this was just, it was fun for me, but it's a way to control, it's a way to tame your mind. Because when you have, for me, I'm a visual person, I like to read and I like, words on the page and that kind of thing, but I'm visual. So what happens is that by seeing it, it really dampened any kind of anxiety that I had. Oh, that's what they do. That's what the doctor's going to do. That's what the procedure looks like. That's the instrument that's used, and so it just created more and more of a sense of my having a part in it, not controlling it.
Yes.
It wasn't a control that I was looking for. It was more that I wanted to be a participant and not being acted upon, but actually acting with. So my sense of radiation, what it was all about, and what it would likely feel like, and what the progression would be. All of that was something that was very calming for me. So I could go into the radiation center and get on the table, and I knew exactly what was going on.
Yes, yes. And I was going to say that also about the conversations. So the conversations, and this is where I'm backing out a little bit, because you and I would have conversations, and I mean just deep, intense conversations. We'd have conversations that would just go. So Charles would come running out of the bedroom. What's going on? Because we would just be so excited and so enthralled in our conversations. And it kept it just kept us, that fire, that internal fire, keep it going. But then the other thing is your conversations with Charles.
Yes, we had a lot of conversations. But back to what Diane was saying, a lot of your conversations, you guys both had very strong points. And I would be almost in the middle of it saying, yeah, that's a very good point that you made about what you made, that you made. And then you guys would go back into it. I mean, it's a lot of good conversations, a lot of good sharing there.
And Charles was our calm, because he would come in with his conversation about.
Yes, I would do that on a regular. On a regular, it would keep it balanced. It would keep it balanced, like a three-legged stool. It would keep it balanced, and then I'd back out gingerly and tactfully, and you guys would go at it again, and then I would hear, and then I'd come back. Well, what about? And then the balance would be there again, and then I would back out. We all learned a lot from that, and sharing.
Well, the way I would translate so much of that is that I mentioned saboteurs earlier, and all of us have them. And when there are there's a strong debate, whether we're talking about between individuals or within families, within countries, whatever, what's happening is that all of those different saboteurs we have our favorite saboteurs. And I could get into that, which I won't, but our favorite saboteurs sometimes bump up against each other.
Yeah.
And all of this is going on inside of our head.
For sure.
And so we communicate differently. We have different word choices. We have different experiences, life experiences. All of this stuff just comes together. And there is one thing I've learned is that there is a healthy underpinning of this, this fire that you mentioned earlier. That fire, if it is used in the interest of advancing something further,
exactly,
that can be helpful to a broader community,
yes, ma'am,
then that makes sense. If the fire is about ego,
right,
then it doesn't work, because people get stuck in their saboteurs.
That's good.
So
That's
mental resilience is it's always thinking in what I call kind of a transformative way. Like, what is going to happen as a result? One of the questions in mental resilience that comes up is, what will you think of this 3 years from now?
good.
Is this really going to make a difference in your life 3 years from now?
Yeah.
And if you really stop and think about that, many of our conversations really are not going to be of any value 3 years from now.
Exactly. You're so right. You're
And
so
so
right.
there's really no reason to invest this precious time that we have in our life with those kinds of disagreements where our saboteurs are just bumping up against each other.
Think about it. We saw you on yesterday, and it had been 3 years from
Yes,
now, right? It
yes.
was 3 years
Yes.
from now. And so the conversations that we had 3 years ago, we weren't having those same conversations. It was a lot of health conversations and what are you going to do, and chemo and radiation, and all of those things. We were talking about ice cream flavors.
Yes, yes.
Talking about ice cream cones. We were talking about like where we were now. We were talking about how we made it over
Yeah.
and continuing. And we were talking about books that I had written, because from 3 years from that point, Charles published a book. I revised a book. I published another book. You're in the process of publishing a book. So we found our way not only through it, but also to give back to it, to give back, to give back.
Well, another point in that is that if we look at whatever is happening right now as having, particularly if we see it, if we choose to see it as a challenge, then we also can begin to believe, and this is mental resilience as well, begin to believe that inside of every challenge is a gift or an opportunity. It's always there.
Yes.
And when I work with my clients, with my coaching clients, very often they'll start the conversation by railing on. They rant about their boss or a coworker or some aspect of their work or the entire organization they work for. I mean, they can go in a lot of different directions. And I will listen to them. And I'll let them, almost like a spinning top, they'll start off really whirling, and then they come to, kind of a rest. And then I'll say to them, so tell me, what are the opportunities in that? And then there's silence. And then it's amazing. Every single time they come up with an opportunity, and I'll say, and what's a gift in that? And they'll talk about that. And they'll say, tell me more. Tell me more. There's more. There are other opportunities. There are other gifts. And we really pull all of that out.
You shift it.
And then I shift. It's transformative. And then at that point, it's okay. Now that you know that, what is your next step?
Exactly.
And we talk about awareness. I actually have an awareness questionnaire that I give to people. And
really, is it downloadable? Do you have it downloadable or?
Not at this point, but I probably will put it on my website.
Yeah.
I gave it as a test to a client and to a friend, and actually to 2 clients and to a friend. And I just wanted to see how they worked with it. And one person said, can I make several copies of this?
Oh, wow.
Because it basically gets people to work through a challenge. And it's not working through the challenge so they know what to do, although that may come up, but working through it to raise their level of awareness.
Nice.
Because things come up in our lives and we are not truly aware of them. We just react to them. That's all that happens. I mean, it could be someone who cuts in front of us as we're driving along the highway. We react. We either say something, we think something, we feel something is going on, but we don't pay attention to any of that.
Right.
We just go on to the next thing.
I have to ask this question for the listeners. How did you react? So 3 years ago, you are diagnosed with throat cancer. We've already established that speaking is a big part of who you are, not only professional, but personally as well. So how did you react? How are you reacting?
I at that time, I made several efforts to sort of what I call lean into it, which is also part of mental resilience. Because when you lean into something, you actually you neutralize it in a sense. There are several instances of that. For instance, I would meditate. If I had pain, I would sit and meditate, or I would meditate lying down. I would, early on when I had the strength, I would do Tai Chi in the room. You didn't see that often, Charles, but I was in the room, doing Tai Chi, either in a sitting Tai Chi or even standing. But I was doing deep breathing. I was really shocked to find that I had been using Insight Timer for meditation. I had amassed 165,000 hours.
Wow.
Over the course of really about 2 years.
Wow.
So I was meditating all the time. I was meditating, not just sitting quietly. Everything I was doing was meditative.
We meditated.
In the sense that I was paying attention at a very deep level of exactly what I was doing in the moment. There were times when I would pick up books and read books that were about meditation or about, inspirational thinking. I would send energy to various parts of my body, not just my throat, but in my mind, I would do that. But then an active thing, a kind of a fun thing I did was, because I could not swallow well and I wasn't eating, I would watch TV shows of food shows.
Yes,
one
you did.
Right after the other.
Yes, you
Every
did.
conceivable food show that there was, I would watch that. And that's what I mean by leaning into it.
Yeah.
Because what happens in terms of, when we lack mental resilience, we're afraid.
Yes.
You're afraid often.
Mm-hmm.
So by leaning into something, you're really embracing what is causing you to be frightened in some way. So it was just kind of fun. I watched shows, I meditated, I even attempted to sing from time to time. I listened to music.
Yes.
I walked.
Yes.
As much as I could. Sometimes I'd walk around the bedroom, if that's as far as I could walk. And I set goals for myself.
Yes. Yes.
That and I had a very deep, still do have a very deep belief that you mentioned moving, that the universe is in constant motion.
For sure.
Everything is moving, everything is growing and moving. And if you sit still, you're out of the flow of it.
Exactly.
To stay in the flow, you have to keep moving. So that's part of mental resilience as well. So it has a physical component, It has an emotional component.
Mm-hmm.
It even has a psychological component,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all about mind. How do
Mm-hmm.
you tame your mind?
I would say also it has a spiritual component, and that is not attached necessarily to religion or things like that.
Exactly.
Everybody, when you say spiritual, you want to, you just want to attach it to, church, religion, or whatever. For me, especially spiritual is where I connect with my peace.
Mhm.
That is my part of my spiritual component. Spiritual for me is where I attach to my peace, where I download and reconnect to love, where I then pass it on. For me, that's a spiritual thing. Sometimes I don't even have to talk with you. I can just think about you and just send you love. You
Mhm.
send me love. I can feel it. And a lot of times then we'll just send a text to follow. But when we do those things, it's not in an expectation where it's a back and forth. It's just sending. I have a really good friend and she says love zings. I love
Mhm.
love zing. She says, I'm sending you a love zing. Sometimes she doesn't even say it, but you could just feel it. It's like you
Mhm.
feel love just come tap you, or you just feel love. You feel
Mhm.
love. It's like somebody's loving on me right now. You just
Mhm.
feel that connection. And I think that that is so important in mental resilience because people need to be checked up on. And in that component, if you can share a little bit, because it's you and Zoe there. So
Mhm.
how have you found ways to connect, and how have you found ways to how are you healing? Because it's not like healed, it's a constant state. It's not like you get healed and then move
Yeah.
on. You're
Yeah.
constantly. So how are you healing?
Well, one of the ways is to, first of all, know how my mind is working,
Mm-hmm.
to know when, I go back to saboteurs, to know when my saboteurs are really kind of getting in the way of my
Mm-hmm.
peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to back up a little and say that for me, spirituality is an attempt to um, find that place at the center of our being and to understand what that means in terms of who we really are. To me, that's real spirituality. And sometimes it means that you really are kind of mystical. As far as I'm concerned, for instance, we've mentioned love a couple of times. For me, love is the only thing that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else around us is just a collection of molecules or atoms in constant motion. And if the atoms slow down enough, it looks solid to us.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing really real except love. And love sits at the center of our being. So when we talk about spirituality, I mean, for some people, it's like that's really woo-woo stuff. But basically, when you really realize who you really are, when
Mm-hmm.
you really get to that, that is the deepest form of resilience ever.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Because when you know that you can go back to that center anytime you want to,
Mm-hmm.
that joy is everywhere, that you don't have to, look for joy or, look for ways to be happy.
Yeah.
You can already be in that space, and you are
Yeah.
already in that space. That's why I have such interest in awareness,
Right.
raising the level of awareness, because if you are aware of how your body is like, it's sort of like a weather vane. That's about
Yeah.
all that it is.
Yeah.
It just gives you
Mm-hmm.
kind of a sense of what's going on. Uh, Miraculous in that, by
Yes.
the way.
Mhm.
But the physical piece is very important. Our bodies hold a lot of information,
For sure.
and mental resilience allows us to use our bodies in a constructive way.
Yes.
Because the more grounded you are in your body, the more resilience you have, the more mental fitness you have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like exercising your mind. And we know that the mind, body, and spirit are connected.
Mm-hmm.
So when you exercise your mind, and you ground yourself in your body, and know that at the center of your being is the source of who you are.
Yes, ma'am.
Now you have the whole thing. There is nothing that can defeat you.
Mm, that is good. I like that. I need to say at that point, we have listeners that are stuck. We have listeners that are thriving, soaring, um, those that live alone, even, in this time. Some people have not fully recovered from sheltering in space, in place. Some people have just, really not rejoined the living. I say, they're still, they're just still in that bubble. What inspiration or encouraging word do you have for our listeners that are coming on the other side of just mental trauma, that are maybe even right now feeling hopeless, that are maybe even right now suffering? What do you have for those? What mental resilience, inspiration, I want to call it, do you have for someone that's just holding on by a thin thread? They're just holding on. Almost it's getting ready to break.
There's so much. There's so much that I can say about that. One is that the basic belief that I have is that we are never alone. That's one, that we simply are never alone. And another kind of companion relief that really fuels that thing, that sense that we're alone, is that fear is a liar. Whenever you feel any kind of fear, just know that that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of mental resilience as well.
Mm,
Is if you feel a negative emotion about anything, just know anything. It could be like the other day when a gecko came into my house. If I had a negative feeling about that, that's fear. What is the gecko going to do? Where is he going to go? He needs to be outside, whatever. I mean, it can be that ridiculous, or it can be, I'm in this place. I'm the only person in this place. I feel very uncomfortable, in this room with this group of people I don't know, etc. It could be that kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
What is going on in your head, the message you are giving yourself, is from fear, and fear is lying to you, messing with you.
That's good.
So fear is a liar, and you are never alone. Now, you might say, yeah, but I'm sitting in this house by myself, right? And the issue there is not so much that you're in your house by yourself, but that you're not liking yourself while you're in that space.
Wow.
So self-judgments are the beginning of stuckness. So once you get beyond that and say, hey, I'm good. There is nothing wrong with me. Absolutely nothing wrong with me. if whatever is going on in my body is what's going on in my body, but it is not me. My illness is not me. My work is not me. My home is not me. Whatever. That's not me. I am an absolutely unrepeatable miracle. If you can say that to yourself.
I like that. Say that one more time.
I am an unrepeatable miracle. If you can say that to yourself, there's no one like me. Absolutely no one. If you're an identical twin, you're two separate miracles.
Exactly.
The other piece about it, from a practical standpoint, is that it's very important that once you get this sense that there's nothing wrong with you, that you move out of your space. Not like literally move, that you go out, you reach out, you touch other people from that stance of there's nothing wrong with me. And oh, by the way, there's nothing wrong with you either.
Yes. Yes.
And when you make that connection, almost ancient philosopher Martin Buber said, all real living is meeting. We are constantly meeting people.
I like that.
When we go to the supermarket, just to test this out, we're going down the aisle. Say hello to somebody in the aisle. So, they will recognize you. People want to recognize other people. They really do. Recognize that person, that homeless person on the street, or as we call them, people who are unhoused. We have all kinds of euphemisms that we're using. The thing is, they are without a home, right?
Exactly.
So they're sitting on the street. They're without a home. Say hello, nod to them. Make eye contact with people. You are not alone. No one is. I won't say you can't, but it's more difficult to make that kind of reaching out when you're not sure who is reaching out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
So when you get clear about who you are and that there's nothing wrong with you, reaching out is easy.
For sure. When you are clearly ready, you will
clearly ready. Absolutely.
And
when
you are never alone. There's always three there, me, myself, and I.
Yes, exactly.
All three of us are there.
You can get them all coordinated.
Yes.
Get them on one page. So this has been so awesome. And I want our listeners to be able to reach out to you and contact you and maybe even acquire your services. Check out your books because you have several books and you're such an inspiration to Charles and I. And two things I want, and Charles, if you have something to say, Charles, I have one thing.
I have one thing to say. Ensure that you share with our listening audience, how can they best reach you? What is the best media for them to get in touch with you?
Yes, and I have one thing to say before we end this. I'd like you to read from today's Daily Sip. Just read what today's Daily Sip is, because I think that goes very well with mental resilience, because you got it. We say you have to fill your mind up, with just positivity, fill your mind up with powerful nuggets and things. But what are those things? Where can you get them? So that's definitely a great reach. So once you find it, Sister E, because I'm going to edit some of this out, but once you find it, first address, what Charles mentioned about how people can get in touch with you. And of course, it's your website and any social medias that you want to share. And then in conclusion, the last thing I want you to do is to read from that, so that resonates that's your drop the mic.
Well, July 4th, it's about vision. So would you like me to read this first, or would you
I want you to tell them how they
to get
can
in
try
contact
how
with
to
me?
get in contact.
Through my website is really the best way. And they can actually, well, there are two ways. They can either send me an email and be in contact with me. And my email right now is smartchangehooks@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or they can reach me through my website, which will then send a message to my email directly. And there is a tab on my website, which is smartchangegroup.com. They can go to smartchangegroup.com and click on the tab that says book a discovery call, and they can get in contact with me at that point.
Awesome. Awesome. Great.
So,
We'll put that in the narrative as well, so that, for those that you want to click on, and it'll take them there. And also you have several books out there. So as we are closing, I'd like you to, just maybe mention your books, and then absolutely read from your book, Daily Sips, one of my favorite.
Yeah, sip something to us.
Well, I have written several books. I started writing back in 1999, a long time ago. And at that time, I wrote a little book that is no longer in print, but it's called Some Folks. And it's a collection of witty expressions. So I started out with just witticisms and humor and that sort of thing. But more recently, I've written a book called African Zen. Some time ago, I realized that African proverbs were really almost like Zen koans. And so it's just, it's almost Zen puzzles. And I used those African proverbs as inspirations for my essays. So I have a book of essays, African Zen, and the subtitle is 108 Meditations on Our Relationship with Spirit. So that's one. And then along with that, a few years later came A Daily Sip of Joy and Peace. And then almost immediately at the same time A Daily Sip of Joy and Peace came out, I also published a teeny little book called The Little Book about who you are, who you really are. And it's called Tea Leaves. So Tea Leaves is a teeny little book, easy read, but kind of dense in terms of its philosophy. It really kind of inspires your thinking. And then I also published a book of poetry called Living in the Presence. And it's poetry about just being in this life, in the presence of spirit, and being in the present moment. And then I've also published another book of quotes called Finding Joy, Finding Yourself. So that's another one that, and you'll find these on my website. And there's a little synopsis with each of them on my website. And then, of course, A Daily Sip is my last book, which was actually released in 2016. And that was kind of a mammoth undertaking, because it is an essay for every day of the year. So you can read through it over and over again. I had actually one friend who unfortunately passed away about a year ago. He actually read through Daily Sip several times, just going day by day. Had another friend who was a pastor of a church, and for their Wednesday night Bible study, they instead, they had, a few moments of Bible scripture, but then they continued with reading the entire daily sip over the course of a year.
Nice.
So it's something that people can go back to over and over again, and they like that aspect of it. So would you like me to read July 4th?
I would, but before that, I would like you to give a shout out to what you got on the way as far as books.
Whoa.
Yes.
You want me to reveal my secrets?
Yes, yes,
No,
yes.
it's not going to be a secret for very long, probably near the end of this month or at the latest, the beginning of August. I will release my memoir on my cancer experience. So much of what we've discussed this afternoon, this morning, afternoon, will be in the book, many aspects, but the book really is a chronicle of what I experienced. And some of the things are, I call them kind of trials and triumphs. Sometimes there's laughter. There are things that you'll laugh at, things that you might tear up a little bit with, some things that will be surprising in the book. But undergirding all of that, the chronicle of the experience, is what it meant. What does all of this mean? And that's kind of the spiritual thing for me. It's not what happened to you, but what did it mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's what you'll get out of my book as well. But I am a professor, so there's a lot of teaching in it as well, and tips for how to get through this experience and come out. And at this point, I can say that I am well.
Yes.
I am well. I've gone through all kinds of things, not just the cancer. There's a whole lot that happened before that, but I am well. So, July 4th, what came up for me there was vision. And the quote at the beginning of the passage is, "When you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music." For me, work is really an important piece. That's the quote. And that's from Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet. Many people know that.
All right. So it has been such a awesome experience and joy, and definitely a mental charge to have our dear friend and sister, Dr. Eleanor Hooks, on the Love Drops podcast. And so we thank you for being our guest.
Yeah, it has been a real pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And of course, this idea of mental resilience is really precious for me because I see the end of it in my work and also in my life, how I live my life right now. And I'm thankful for the experience of cancer, that it really put this idea that I need to have a different way of looking at life. And mental resilience is a way that has helped me to do that.
Awesome.
Yes. And we certainly appreciate you sharing so much with Diane and I and our listening audience here on the podcast, on the Love Drops podcast. We'll end this podcast with a meditation from Eleanor Hooks' book entitled A Daily Sip of Joy and Peace. Reading from Eleanor Hooks' book, a section entitled Vision, July 4th. When you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispers of the hour turns to music. By Khalil Gibran, The Prophet. Work is an act of love and an inspirational journey. No one can damper the enthusiasm of the work that is joyful and intentional. Yet we sometimes fall short of our immovable goals and give up the vision. Disappointments along the journey can be frustrating, but the vision we hold shines, even through the darkest day. Most will agree that persistence work is necessary to be successful, although there are many ways to measure success. Good performance may achieve specified goals, but there is more to life and spirit than reaching goals. Personal integrity relies on strong intention and a clear vision. Yet we sometimes say yes to work that does not stir our souls and say no to work that is our spiritual identity. When we adjust these mismatched behaviors, saying yes, when we feel inconceivable joy, and no, when the work does not feed our soul, we begin to work with integrity. Work that is entered into with joy is an act of service to our collective consciousness. And again, that was from A Daily Sip of Joy and Peace by Eleanor Hooks.
We thank Eleanor for joining us on Love Drop Podcast. We thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and share. Again, this is our 3rd year streaming with almost 200 episodes out there. So go back and check them out. We have episodes from Eleanor Hooks. I think we've had her on the show at least twice, once during her treatment. So definitely go back and see and feel the mental resilience of this phenomenal woman. We are just honored to have her. We're honored to call her friend and family. Until next time.
This is Charles
and Diane. One love.
love.
Never a second will I waste. Never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life.
Thank you for tuning in to the Love Drops Podcast. Be sure to follow this podcast and share the love with everyone you know. Until next time, this is Charles and Diane signing off. One love.
Love it conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never